Gospel according to Luke, the 23rd chapter. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by watching. But the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." The Gospel of the Lord. As I have often said, Mother Sydney and I watch programs together the nights I'm home. Usually these are lecture series from a company called the Teaching Company. Our current course is about palaces in the ancient world. Palaces, like palaces today. Places where kings, queens, and other rulers lived. Given the recent death of Queen Elizabeth II, we are probably most familiar with Buckingham Palace in London. Elizabeth was a modern queen. Let me ask you about an ancient king. Because we're already seeing images of Christmas, I'll ask this. Who was the King of the Jews when Jesus was born? Herod, right. Now, at the very top of the government chain was the Roman emperor. As in Luke chapter 2, verse 1, in those days a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. But more locally, in what we today would call Israel and the West Bank, there was a local king called Herod. He ruled on behalf of and under the authority of the emperor. A client king is the term sometimes used for people like Herod. Well, in our course, we heard 2 lectures about Herod's palaces. Herod, you see, was keen on building things. Palaces for himself, a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem for the Jews, fortresses. Especially in the beginning of his reign, Herod was somewhat insecure. So he wanted to display his power and glory through buildings. 2 of Herod's palaces that we visited last week through pictures were in a place called Masada, about 60 miles south of Jerusalem. Let me describe this setting. It is a desert region, about 2 inches of rain a year. Masada itself is a high mountain with a flat top. We call them mesas out west. High, 1,300 feet above the surrounding desert floor. The mountains south of my house rise about 900 feet above our valley floor. So Masada is higher than that. The top flat area is about 17 acres, and it was up there that King Herod built 2 palaces and several smaller houses. Why there? It was an easy place to defend, a fortress, as well as a place to stay. I don't have pictures to show you, and I'm not planning to talk about these palaces in any detail. But there is one thing I do want to mention: water. Remember, I said that Masada is in a desert, and yet Herod had lavish amounts of water up there on Masada. There was water for baths. There was water for gardens. There was water for a large swimming pool. There were cisterns, underground water storage cavities that could hold huge amounts of water. I found one reference that says that one of the cisterns up there could hold more than 1 million gallons of water. It adds, quote, one scholar has estimated that if all the cisterns were half full, there would be enough water to sustain thousands of people for 10 years. The teacher we are listening to says the following: the profligate use of, as well as display of water, was a display of power. It demonstrated that Herod controlled the resources of his kingdom that would allow such an impractical project in this inhospitable territory. That large swimming pool was originally placed in an element of a series of gardens, an extraordinary achievement of logistics and royal will in this climate. How did all of that water get up there at the top of a mountain in the desert? Herod built dams, aqueducts, and cisterns to capture the water flowing through dry ravines on those rare occasions when it did rain. This water was held in reservoirs that had a capacity of over 10 million gallons. Then, as water was needed, slaves and pack animals carried the water from these lower cisterns to the ones up at the top of the mountain. Herod may have been the king of just a small, relatively unimportant province in the Roman Empire, but he lived well, very well. Kings. Today we think about kings as being figureheads, ceremonial figures. But kings in Jesus' day, and for most of history, were the ones in charge, living the most self-indulgent lives you could imagine. Again, Herod was not the top of the world by any means. The province that he controlled was nothing compared to many other parts of the Roman Empire. But the people of Jesus' day could see in Herod a level of power, luxury, and control that would be incredibly impressive. Indeed, I suspect that even we, with our history of Gould's pumps, would be impressed by Herod's water system alone. Well, if that was a real earthly king, how does our Jesus compare? After all, this is called Christ the King Sunday, Our gospel reading talked about the inscription hanging over Jesus. This is the King of the Jews. The reason Jesus was being executed, because he called himself a king, though the people who mocked him thought he was a fraud. And no wonder the soldiers mocked him. This basically naked man, no doubt dirty and full of wounds, fastened on a cross with no obvious power or authority. This man, Jesus, seemed as far removed from a real king as you could get. We can be impressed by Herod's power and how he used it. But what about Jesus? It seems that there is nothing at all impressive here. Unless this Jesus really is who we say he is, the indwelling of the fullness of God, the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, and all of those other glorious phrases from our second reading this morning. If puny human Herod could impress us by the great things he could build because he oppressed and stole from his people, shouldn't we be even more impressed by the shockingly humble things that Jesus did as the divine Son of God? At one point, when Jesus stood before Herod's successor, Pontius Pilate, Jesus said to Pilate in John chapter 18 that his kingdom, Jesus' kingship, was not from this world. No, it wasn't. Jesus' kingship didn't derive from this world, and it was nothing like what this world would expect. Indeed, Jesus' kingship was a challenge and a condemnation of selfish worldly power. But who could see this new reality, this greater reality? Well, there was that fellow hanging next to Jesus on a nearby cross. The man who asked him, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." If you were up on Masada with Herod, it would make sense to ask him for a favor. "Herod, may I take a dip in your pool?" He would seem to have the power to grant a request. But how could that thief hanging next to Jesus see in that equally condemned man the gate to paradise? Or consider one of my visits to Mary Ann Cotinas, when I saw her in the nursing home in Pottsville, where she was simply waiting to die. She said to me, "I pray to God daily. He's still in my corner." She had no strength. She suffered pain at times. She had no prospects of defeating her cancer. She was, in other words, as doomed as that man hanging next to Jesus on the cross. And yet she made the same prayer he did, with the same confidence. That is who sees the reality that Jesus is indeed King. That Jesus is really the one who should be praised and obeyed. Not because he showed great power by building swimming pools in the desert, but because he died on a cross when he could have stayed in glory. Jesus is the real thing. It is Herod and countless other cruel, selfish, and pompous people who are the frauds when it comes to being king. Amen.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble.
Therefore we will not fear, and the mountains shake in the depths of the sea.
Though its waters rage and foam, and though the mountains tremble with its tumult.
There is a river of streams that glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High.
God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be shaken. God shall help it at the break of day.
The nations rage and the kingdoms shake. God speaks and the earth melts away.
The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold.
Come and regard the works of the Lord, because the nations God has brought upon the earth.
Behold the one who makes war to cease in all the world, who breaks the bow and shatters the spear and burns the shields with fire.
He still and upheld my heart. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth.
The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold.
we will not have Bible study yet again tomorrow. So none tomorrow. Jean Hindermeyer had her teeth cut out and has a lot of pain. So we know she can't be here. So no Bible study tomorrow. Otherwise,